Hello and welcome to Bookspot. I'm Earl Wajenberg. This time we're going to continue our reading of The Day Boy and the Night Girl by George MacDonald. A witch, as an experiment, has raised a boy to never experience anything but day and a girl to experience nothing but night. But the boy winds up staying out one night and is terrified until he meets the girl, who comforts him. But now the night is over, and the girl is about to see day for the first time. For the sun was rushing up behind her. Photogen woke, lifted his head from her lap, and sprang to his feet. His face was one radiant smile. His heart was full of daring, that of the hunter who will creep into a tiger's den. Nycteris gave a cry, covered her face with her hands, and pressed her eyelids close. Then blindly she stretched out her arms to Photogen, crying, "Oh, I am so frightened! What is this? It must be death! I don't wish to die yet! I love this room and the old lamp! I do not want the other place! This is terrible! I want to hide! I want to get into the soft, sweet, dark hands of all the other creatures! Oh, me!" "What's the matter with you, girl?" said Photogen, with the arrogance of all male creatures until they have been taught by the other kind. He stood looking down upon her over his bow, of which he was examining the string. "There is no fear of anything now, child. It is day. The sun is all but up. Look, he will be above the brow of yon hill in one moment more. Goodbye. Thank you for my night's lodging. I'm off. Don't be a goose. If ever I can do anything for you and all that—" "Don't leave me! Oh, don't leave me!" cried Nycteris. "I am dying! I am dying! I can't move! The light sucks all the strength out of me! Oh, I'm so frightened!" But already Photogen had splashed through the river, holding high his bow that it might not get wet. He rushed across the level and strained up the opposing hill. Hearing no answer, Nycteris removed her hands. Photogen had reached the top, and the same moment the sun rays alighted upon him, the glory of the King of Day blazing upon the gold-haired youth. Radiant as Apollo, he stood in mighty strength, a flashing shape in the midst of flame. He fitted a glowing arrow to a gleaming bow. The arrow parted with a keen musical twang of the bowstring, and Photogen, darting after it, vanished with a shout. Up shot Apollo himself, and from his quiver scattered astonishment and exultation. But the brain of poor Nycteris was pierced through and through. She fell down in utter darkness. All around her was a flaming furnace. In despair and feebleness and agony, she crept back, feeling her way with doubt and difficulty and enforced persistence to her cell. When at last the friendly darkness of her chamber folded her about with its cooling and consoling arms, she threw herself on her bed and fell fast asleep. And there she slept on, one alive in a tomb, while Photogen, above in the sun-glory, pursued the buffaloes on the lofty plain, thinking not once of her where she lay dark and forsaken, whose presence had been his refuge, her eyes and her hands his guardians through the night. He was in his glory and his pride, and the darkness and its disgrace had vanished for a time. 15. The Coward Hero. But no sooner had the sun reached the noonstead than Photogen began to remember the past night in the shadow of that which was at hand, and to remember it with shame. He had proved himself, and not only himself, but to a girl as well, a coward, one bold in the daylight while there was nothing to fear, but trembling like any slave when the night arrived. There must be something unfair in it. A spell had been cast upon him. He had eaten, he had drunk something that did not agree with courage. In any case, he had been taken unprepared. How was he to know what the going down of the sun would be like? It was no wonder he should have been surprised into terror, seeing it was what it was, in its very nature so terrible. Also, one could not see where danger might be coming from. You might be torn in pieces, carried off, or swallowed up, without even seeing where to strike a blow. Every possible excuse he caught at, eager as a self-lover to lighten his self-contempt. That day he astonished the huntsmen, terrified them with his reckless daring, all to prove to himself he was no coward. But nothing eased his shame. One thing only had hope in it, the resolve to encounter the dark in solemn earnest, now that he knew something of what it was. It was nobler to meet a recognized danger than to rush contemptuously into what seemed nothing, nobler still to encounter a nameless horror. He could conquer fear and wipe out disgrace together. For a marksman and swordsman like him, he said, one with his strength and courage, there was but danger. Defeat there was not. He knew the darkness now, and when it came he would meet it as fearless and cool as now he felt himself. And again he said, "We shall see." He stood under the boughs of a great beech as the sun was going down, far away over the jagged hills. Before it was half down, he was trembling like one of the leaves behind him in the first sigh of the night wind. The moment the last of the glowing disk vanished, he bounded away in terror to gain the valley, and his fear grew as he ran. Down the side of the hill, an abject creature, he went, bounding and rolling and running, fell rather than plunged into the river, and came to himself as before, lying on the grassy bank in the garden. But when he opened his eyes, there were no girl eyes looking down into his. There were only the stars in the waste of the sunless night, the awful all-enemy he had again dared but could not encounter. Perhaps the girl was not yet come out of the water. He would try to sleep, for he dared not move, and perhaps when he woke he would find his head on her lap, and the beautiful dark face with its deep blue eyes bending over him. But when he woke he found his head on the grass, and although he sprang up with all his courage, such as it was, restored, he did not set out for the chase with such an elan as the day before. And despite the sun-glory in his heart and veins, his hunting was that day less eager. He ate little, and from the first was thoughtful even to sadness. The second time he was defeated and disgraced. Was his courage nothing more than the play of sunlight upon his brain? Was he a mere ball tossed between the light and the dark? Then what a poor contemptible creature he was. But a third chance lay before him. If he failed the third time, he dared not foreshadow what he must then think of himself. It was bad enough now, but then— Alas, it was no better. The moment the sun was down, he fled as if from a legion of devils. 7 times in all he tried to face the coming night in the strength of the past day, and 7 times he failed with such increase of failure, with such a growing sense of ignominy, overwhelming at length all the sunny hours, and joining night to night, that, what with misery, self-accusation, and loss of confidence, his daylight courage began too to fade, and at length from exhaustion, from getting wet, and then lying out of doors all night, and night after night, worst of all, from the consuming and the deathly fear, and the shame of shame, his sleep forsook him, and on the 7th morning, instead of going to the hunt, he crawled into the castle and went to bed. The grand health over which the witch had taken such pains had yielded, and in an hour or two he was moaning and crying out in delirium. 16. An evil nurse. Watho was herself ill, as I have said, and was the worst tempered. And besides, it is a peculiarity of witches that what works in others to sympathy works in them to repulsion. Also, Watho had a poor, helpless, rudimentary spleen of a conscience left, just enough to make her uncomfortable, and therefore more wicked. So, when she heard that Photogen was ill, she was angry. Ill, indeed, after all she had done to saturate him with the life of the system, with the solar might itself. He was a wretched failure, the boy. And all because he was her failure, she was annoyed with him, began to dislike him, grew to hate him. She looked on him as a painter might upon a picture, or a poet upon a poem, which he has only succeeded in getting into an irrevocable mess. In the hearts of witches, love and hate lie close together, and often tumble over each other. And whether it was that her failure with Photogen foiled also her plans in regard to Nycteris, or that her illness made her yet more of a devil's wife, certainly Watho now got sick of the girl too, and hated to know her about the castle. She was not too ill, however, to go to poor Photogen's room and torment him. She told him she hated him like a serpent, and hissed like one as she said it, looking very sharp in the nose and chin, and flat in the forehead. Photogen thought she meant to kill him, and hardly ventured to take anything brought him. She ordered every ray of light to be shut out of his room, but by means of this he got a little used to the darkness. She would take one of his arrows, and now tickle him with the feather end of it, now prick him with the point till the blood ran down. What she meant finally I cannot tell, but she brought Photogen speedily to the determination of making his escape from the castle. What he should do then he would think afterward. Who could tell but he might find his mother somewhere beyond the forest? If it were not for the broad patches of darkness that divided day from day, he would fear nothing. But now, as he lay helpless in the dark, ever and anon would come dawning through it the face of the lovely creature who on that first awful night nursed him so sweetly. Was he never to see her again? If she was, as he had concluded, the nymph of the river, why had she not reappeared? She might have taught him not to fear the night, for plainly she had no fear of it herself. But then, when the day came, she did seem frightened. Why was that, seeing there was nothing to be afraid of then? Perhaps one so much at home in the darkness was correspondingly afraid of the light. Then his selfish joy at the rising of the sun, blinding him to her condition, had made him behave to her in ill return for her kindness as cruelly as Watho behaved to him. How sweet and dear and lovely she was! If there were wild beasts that came out only at night and were afraid of the light, why should there not be girls, too, made the same way, who could not endure the light, as he could not bear the darkness? If only he could find her again! Ah, how differently he would have behaved to her! But alas, perhaps the sun had killed her, melted her, burned her up, dried her up. That was it, if she was the nymph of the river. 17. Watho's Wolf. From that dreadful morning, Nycteris had never got to be herself again. The sudden light had been almost death to her, and now she lay in the dark with the memory of a terrific sharpness, of something she dared scarcely recall, lest the very thought of it should sting her beyond endurance. But this was as nothing to the pain which the recollection of the rudeness of the shining creature whom she had nursed through his fear caused her. For the moment his suffering passed over to her, and he was free, the first use he had made of his returning strength had been to scorn her. She wondered and wondered. It was all beyond her comprehension. Before long, Watho was plotting evil against her. The witch was like a sick child weary of his toy. She would pull her to pieces and see how she liked it. She would set her in the sun and see her die, like a jelly from the salt ocean cast out on a hot rock. It would be a sight to soothe her wolf pain. One day, therefore, a little before noon, while Nycteris was in her deepest sleep, she had a darkened litter brought to the door, and in that made 2 of her men carry her to the plain above. There they took her out, laid her on the grass, and left her. Watho watched it all from the top of her high tower through her telescope, and scarcely was Nycteris left when she saw her sit up, and the same moment cast herself down again with her face to the ground. "She'll have sunstroke," said Watho, "and that'll be the end of her." Presently, tormented by a fly, a huge humped buffalo with great shaggy mane came galloping along, straight for where she lay. At sight of the thing on the grass, he started, swerved yards aside, stopped dead, and then came slowly up, looking malicious. Nycteris lay quite still, and never even saw the animal. "Now she'll be trodden to death," said Watho. "That's the way those creatures do." When the buffalo reached her, he sniffed at her all over, and went away, then came back and sniffed again, then all at once went off as if a demon had him by the tail. Next came a gnu, a more dangerous animal still, and did much the same. Then a gaunt wild boar. But no creature hurt her, and Watho was angry with the whole creation. At length, in the shade of her hair, the blue eyes of Nycteris began to come to themselves a little, and the first thing they saw was a comfort. I have told you already how she knew the night daisies, each a sharp-pointed little cone with a red tip, and once she had parted the rays of one of them with trembling fingers, for she was afraid she was dreadfully rude, and perhaps was hurting it. But she did want, she said to herself, to see what secret it carried so carefully hidden, and she found its golden heart. But now, right under her eyes, inside the veil of her hair, in the sweet twilight of whose blackness she could see it perfectly, stood a daisy with its red tip opened wide into a carmine ring, displaying its heart of gold on a platter of silver. She did not at first recognize it as one of those cones come awake, but a moment's notice revealed what it was. Who then could have been so cruel to the lovely little creature as to force it open like that, and spread it heart bare to the terrible death lamp? Whoever it was, it must be the same that had thrown her out there to be burned to death in its fire. But she had her hair, and could hang her head, and make a small sweet night of her own about her. She tried to bend the daisy down and away from the sun, and to make its petals hang about it like her hair, but she could not. Alas, was it burned and dead already? She did not know that it could not yield to her gentle force, because it was drinking life with all the eagerness of life from what she called the death lamp. Oh, how the lamp burned her! But she went on thinking, she did not know how, and by began to reflect that as there was no roof to the room except that in which the great fire went rolling about, the little red tip must have seen the lamp 1,000 times, and must know it quite well, and it had not killed it. Nay, thinking about farther, she began to ask the question whether this in which she now saw it might not be its more perfect condition. For not only now did the whole seem perfect, as indeed it did before, but every part showed its own individual perfection as well, which perfection made it capable of combining with the rest into the higher perfection of the whole. The flower was a lamp itself. The golden heart was the light, and the silver border was the alabaster globe skillfully broken and spread wide to let out the glory. Yes, the radiant lamp was plainly its perfection. If then it was the lamp which had opened it into that shape, the lamp could not be unfriendly to it, but must be of its own kind, seeing it made perfect. And again, when she thought of it, there was clearly no little resemblance between them. What if the flower, then, was the little great-grandchild of the lamp, and he was loving it all the time? And what if the lamp did not mean to hurt her, only could not help it? The red tips looked as if the flower had some time or other been hurt. What if the lamp was making the best it could of her, opening her out somehow like the flower? She would bear it patiently and see. But how coarse the color of the grass was! Perhaps, however, her eyes not being made for the bright lamp, she did not see them as they were. Then she remembered how different were the eyes of the creature that was not a girl, and was afraid of the darkness. Ah, if the darkness would only come again, all arms, friendly and soft everywhere about her! She would wait, and bear, and be patient. She lay so still that Watho did not doubt she had fainted. She was pretty sure she would be dead before the night came to revive her. 18. Refuge. Fixing her telescope on the motionless form, that she might see at once when the morning came, Watho went down from the tower to Photogen's room. He was much better by this time, and before she left him he had resolved to leave the castle that very night. The darkness was terrible indeed, but Watho was worse than even the darkness, and he could not escape in the day. As soon, therefore, as the house seemed still, he tightened his belt, hung to it his hunting knife, put a flask of wine and some bread in his pocket, and took his bow and arrows. He got from the house and made his way at once up to the plain. But what with his illness, the terrors of the night, and his dread of the wild beasts, when he got to the level he could not walk a step farther, and sat down, thinking it better to die than to live. In spite of his fears, however, sleep contrived to overcome him, and he fell at full length on the soft grass. He had not slept long when he woke with such a strange sense of comfort and security that he thought the dawn at least must have arrived. But it was dark night about him, and the sky— no, it was not the sky, but the blue eyes of his naiad looking down upon him. Once more he lay with his head in her lap, and all was well, for plainly the girl feared the darkness as little as he the day. "Thank you," he said. "You are like live armor to my heart. You keep the fear off me. I have been very ill since then. Did you come up out of the river when you saw me cross?" "I don't live in the water," she answered. "I live under the pale lamp, and I die under the bright one." "Ah, yes, I understand now," he returned. "I would not have behaved as I did last time if I had understood. But I thought you were mocking me, and I am so made that I cannot help being frightened at the darkness. I beg your pardon for leaving you as I did, for as I say, I did not understand. Now I believe you were really frightened, were you not?" "I was indeed," answered Nycteris, "and shall be again. But why you should be, I cannot in the least understand. You must know how gentle and sweet the darkness is, how kind and friendly, how soft and velvety. It holds you to its bosom and loves you. A little while ago I lay faint and dying under your hot lamp. What is it you call it?" "The sun," murmured Photogen. "How I wish he would make haste." "Ah, do not wish for that. Do not for my sake hurry him. I can take care of you from the darkness, but I have no one to take care of me from the light. As I was telling you, I lay dying in the sun. All at once I drew a deep breath. A cool wind came and ran over my face. I looked up. The The torture was gone, for the death lamp itself was gone. I hope he does not die and grow brighter yet. My terrible headache was all gone, and my sight was come back. I felt as if I were new made, but I did not get up at once, for I was tired still. The grass grew cool around me and turned soft in color. Something wet came upon it, and it was now so pleasant to my feet that I rose and ran about. And when I had been running about a long time, all at once I found you lying just as I had been lying a little while before. So I sat down beside you to take care of you, till your life and my death should come again. How good you are, you beautiful creature! Why, you forgave me before I even asked you, cried Photogen. Thus they fell a-talking, and he told her what he knew of his history, and she told him what she knew of hers, and they agreed they must get away from Watho as far as ever they could. And we must set out at once, said Nycteris. The moment the morning comes, returned Photogen. We must not wait for the morning, said Nycteris, for then I shall not be able to move, and what will you do the next night? Besides, Watho sees best in the daytime. Indeed, you must come now, Photogen, you must. I cannot, I dare not, said Photogen. I cannot move, but if I lift my head from your lap, the very sickness of terror seizes me. I shall be with you, said Nycteris soothingly. I will take care of you till your dreadful sun comes, and then you may leave me and go away as fast as you can. Only please put me in a dark place first, if there is one to be found. I will never leave you again, Nycteris, cried Photogen. Only wait till the sun comes and brings me back my strength, and we will go away together, and never, never part any more. No, no, persisted Nycteris, we must go now, and you must learn to be strong in the dark as well as in the day, else you will always be only half brave. I have begun already not to fight your son, but to try to get at peace with him, and understand what he really is and what he means with me, whether to hurt me or to make the best of me. You must do the same with my darkness. But you don't know what mad animals there are away there toward the south, said Photogen. They have huge green eyes, and they would eat you up like a bit of celery, you beautiful creature. Come, come, you must, said Nycteris, or I shall have to pretend to leave you to make you come. I have seen the green eyes you speak of, and I will take care of you from them. You? How can you do that? If it were day now, I could take care of you from the worst of them, but as it is, I can't even see them for this abominable darkness. I could not see your lovely eyes, but for the light that is in them. That lets me see straight into heaven through them. They are windows into the very heaven beyond the sky. I believe they are the very place where the stars are made. You come then, or I shall shut them, said Nycteris, and you shan't see them any more till you are good. Come, if you can't see the wild beasts, I can. You can, and you ask me to come, cried Photogen. Yes, answered Nycteris, and more than that, I see them long before they can see me, so that I am able to take care of you. But how? Persisted Photogen. You can't shoot them with bow and arrow, or stab them with a hunting knife. No, but I can keep out of the way of them all. Why, just when I found you, I was having a game with 2 or 3 of them at once, and scent them, too, long before they are near me, long before they can see or scent me. You don't see or scent any now, do you? Said Photogen uneasily, rising on his elbow. No, none at present. I will look, replied Nycteris, and sprang to her feet. Oh, do not leave me, not for a moment, cried Photogen, straining his eyes to keep her face in sight through the darkness. And there we must leave them for the time being. But next time we will see how Photogen and Nycteris get on together when one can't take the light and the other can't take the darkness. Good night.